Hello, everyone. Thank you for joining us today for our webinar, our guide product webinar. Today's webinar, Optimize Output Management with InterForm and Guides FormPack for Infor XA. So, next slide. Today, your guide team is, we have Rick Altino with us, who is a managing partner at Guide Technologies. We have Carlos Vela, our consulting manager, Randy Kenny, who is our consulting manager and guide products manager, Vic Balebchuk, our senior consultant, and finally myself, Wendy Broom, marketing director with Guide Technologies. So after these intros, I'm going to go ahead and hand it off to Rick Altino to get everyone started and show and tell you more about Guides FormPack.
Very good. Thank you, Wendy. I appreciate that. What we're going to be doing today is simply walking through. I skipped the agenda. Wait a minute. Let me go back one. There we go. We're going to walk through basically what InterForm and FormPack does. But along with that, I want to introduce to you how all of this output management functions of current XA can work. So we're going to talk a little bit about document management. We're going to talk a little bit about scanning forms and things like that. But we want to make sure that you understand the big picture. We're truly in a position now that we can be paperless with XA. And through the years, Infor has done a couple of different changes to this process. And some of you may have some other software applications that were purchased in the past, like IntelliChief. InterForm is definitely a more state-of-the-art package. It is the current go-forward forms output package with the system. And if you guys have any questions on that, I pretty much know everybody that's signed up for this webinar. So feel free to contact me or your account exec if you have any questions. So with that, I'm going to dive in here and move on. So what is output management in XA? Well, for years, we have always had pre-printed forms. And most people have moved beyond this, oftentimes using some sort of third-party package. But the standard pre-printed form that comes out of XA is your purchase order, is your accounts payable check, it's your acknowledgement. And buying those forms can be quite expensive, just getting the pre-printed forms. And then typically when you're doing that, you're saving paper copies of them yourself. So it's very, very expensive to have the square footage for all the filing cabinets, to be filing forms, pulling them out, refiling them, and then you lose them, and there's a lot of paper involved here. That has been the traditional approach. But what we have done now is we've taken this point that we can walk through all these processes from a paperless standpoint. So let me show you what I mean by that. And Randy, you're moving your mouse. I can't. There we go. All right. So when there's two of us controlling this at the same time, sometimes it gets confusing. But anyway, what we're talking about with XA is basically we want to be able, without a single pre-printed form, to format and distribute your forms. That is what InterForm can do for you. And I'm going to be spending most of this presentation on it, introducing those concepts. But with document management and the ability to use a lot of different delivery functions, we can have a complete closed loop system to be able to save all these forms. You no longer have to print a form, scan it, and email it out. We can email directly from the iSeries. We can do that to your customers, to your vendors. We can get rid of the function of handling paper. So if you were printing, for instance, 100 invoices right now, well, 90 of them might just automatically email, and you would never even print any. There might be 2 of them that are still using fax machines. Those 2 would automatically fax. The form would be created as a PDF. It would be emailed or faxed, and we can save a copy of that PDF without ever printing the document at all. Now, you might still have 8 customers that are asking for a form. Well, in that case, the paper would print on any laser printer or any printer of any type, actually, and you could then mail them out the way you would normally do it today. So the delivery and the forms output management does not require a single pre-printed form. Now, what InterForm is able to do is it's able to create a number of different formats. So we can print labels, we can print RFID, we can actually just print the documents that you're looking for. We can print PDF or signed controlled PDFs. We can send to XML, Excel. We can email or fax automatically. And we can archive either back into the IDF or into document management. So all of these functions can be set up by form, by customer. You can change the rules as you're going along. And then, of course, we can file it either back into what I just said, IDF. So you know how you can do attachments in IDF. That's not a controlled thing, but we can still use that, or we can transfer it into IDM, Infor Document Management, as a controlled document and link it to all of your data inside of XA. So when you're looking at an XA order, you can push a button and look at the invoice. You can look at the original purchase order that came from the customer. You can look at any of the paperwork that was generated, and it's all in PDF format online. Then, of course, if we're truly going to go paperless, well, what about our incoming forms? Well, we can scan those too. And those can either go into the IDF files or, again, preferred method, go into document management. Document management, if you own ION, you own Infor Document Management. Many people own it and don't even know that they have it. This is a function of one of your flexes earlier that you simply got this application at one of those times and you can use it. We just have to get it implemented. Now, we already have shop floor data collection, whether it's MES, whether it's guide, scan, and track, or a combination of both. These are truly paperless operations. In fact, MES is called paperless. So we don't have to print shop packets or barcodes or anything on the shop floor to control those things anymore. Now, with all the document we can do with InterForm, we can take the office and link in document management and link in the forms on the office side true, and the whole thing truly becomes paperless. Now, when I say that you can do this by customer or by vendor, what I'm saying is you can do a complete distribution of how your documents print. So you're printing an invoice. Do you want to print it yourself locally? Do you want to send it to one of the multiple printers on your system, on your network? Do you want to print a different copy of the order in the sales department than in the accounting department? Maybe one has costs. Maybe one has commission information. The other one doesn't. These can all be generated out of the same document. You can look at it on your own workstation. You can dispatch it and save it into your document management function. So all these things you can configure each and every form. One of the huge advantages of InterForm, it's no longer spool file based. So any of you that are using something like IntelliChief, you know you have to generate a spool file. IntelliChief reads the iSeries spool file and then creates a form. InterForm can start from any point. So if you're creating MSDS sheets out of a network, you can start that on your network and use InterForm and do all the same generations. You don't have to start this in the iSeries. Now, Ross down at Infor is talking about after release 11, not even creating output forms anymore, just calling an XML command, which InterForm can read, and you can generate whatever forms you want. So there's a lot of power here as to how to move this thing forward. Now, as I'm talking about all of this, I'm referencing a number of different applications, and I just want you to know what they are. So we're talking about the XA ERP with the IDF interface, because that's where we can link in document management, specifically the NetLink capability, into IDF. We're talking about either MES or scan and track, or a combination of both for your shop floor paperless system. Then we're talking about the iOS, that's the Infor Operating Services, using Mingle, ION, and Infor Document Management. All of these things don't need to be installed. For you to run InterForm, we can simply load it onto your iSeries. I'm just showing you the whole picture here as we're looking at the InterForm package and then the guide FormPack, because we've recreated the forms for you so you don't have to create it. And finally, we can scan any documents that are coming in, and we have Episoft, which can use in context scanning, so it can actually read data off the forms that are coming to you. So this is sort of a layout of what XA looks like. Here are all the XA applications and all the different functions that you own. But ION here is where we connect Mingle. and document management. Those functions right there are the ones that allow us to tie in the controlled form capability into XA. I'll show you what a screen looks like in just a second. Now, because it's using Mingle, we're not limited to your computer screen. You can use pads. You could get to documents on your phone. Heck, anymore, if you have HTML on your watch, you can get to it there. So these forms are not limited to being inside your facility or even onto your computer. You can be doing work from home. You can be doing work anywhere that you're authorized, and you can get into your system. So that tech stack ties all of that together. And then when you're looking at document management itself, this is a listing of documents that are in there. This isn't probably the screen you would use most of the time, but I just wanted to show you, we collect documents here. These are secured. You have to have authority to them. We give you a preview over here of what it is that you're looking at. But when you load these things from XA, here's an XA screen. You can recognize the item revision cost screen. This is for an MP3 player. And here is the documents associated with it. So because I'm in NetLink, all of this ties together. I can simply click on the document. Now, if I was looking at a customer order, I could come over here and look at the invoice. There's little arrows right here. So I could scan through. A customer order might have 4 or 5 documents. It might have the acknowledgement. It might have a bill of lading. It might have an invoice. You can link all those together automatically. And not only can I see it here in XA, but I can see it on an app. It ties them together as part of the database. And then here is a screen again. Now I'm looking at the item revision master file. And because I clicked on this very first one, these are the documents associated with it. So those of you that are not used to this box right here where the mouse is going around, that is NetLink. That is the part of the XA system that you're used to using now. These additional widgets on the right-hand side is a part of Mingle. And inside of Mingle, you can associate the different software programs. This right here is document management. So these all link together. This is what XA looks like right now if you configure the whole system. So we have the ability to capture whether you're bringing in forms or creating forms. If you're creating forms, you create that acknowledgement. You don't ever have to print anything. It will load it, post it to the Infor document management, and you can retrieve it from anywhere. And you can distribute it to all the different methods I talked about earlier. You can then manage those documents, and this is security controlled. So in some cases, if you want revision control, you could do that. If you were attaching drawings to your item revision files, excuse me, sorry about that. You don't want to delete those old revisions. You don't want them accidentally deleted. You can force this through security to rev itself and then deliver. How do I get these to the places that it needs to go? So with that, I mentioned very much that it's no longer just something that you have to generate a spool file now from the iSeries. We can generate forms from multiple locations for multiple functions. Carlos, I'll let you talk about this. This is the automotive piece and the labeling and the capabilities that tie into InterForm.
Hey, good afternoon, everybody. One thing that everybody should know about InterForm is that InterForm is a very powerful tool that is based off of an XML type of interface. And one thing that they already provide for the customer base is an extensive template or suite of templates that allow you to generate all the forms that you need if you are an automotive customer. So from that standpoint, they have got all the VDA and ODET and AIAG document templates by supplier. So if you are working with Ford, Ford has its own list of templates. If you are working with John Deere, they have their own list of templates, and they have standard templates and what I call variants. So let's say that you might have a standard form that is used by everybody, but Chrysler has some differences that are required. Then you will have definitely a different level of label, waybill, statements, you name it. They are customized already for the use by the automotive industry. So there is, if you are a automotive customer and are struggling through and trying to get all the forms that are needed, especially if, let's say today you might be working with the main three, GM, Ford, Chrysler, and tomorrow all of a sudden you have to work with Honda or Hyundai or Kia. The forms are already all pre-built, and it makes it very quick to ramp up additional customers that you might be working with. So I just wanted to bring that up to everybody that InterForm does have a huge presence in the automotive area. So I'm going to stay on the call here, and I'm going to talk about Guide's FormPack solution. And probably the main thing that everybody has to understand is, why did Guide decide that we should generate a FormPack solution? And probably the easiest way to explain this is that for any customer to go out there and build the forms that are base forms, such as POs or MOs or customer acknowledgements, it takes a while to actually map out the form. So the value that the FormPack delivers is speed of which you can get your forms up and running at a very limited or cheap cost. And why is that important? Well, it's adoption, I think, is probably the main thing, is that I am able to go in and install InterForm, then install the FormPack, add some logos to it, and then basically, you're up and running. So from the time that you install it to the time that you are ready to start utilizing and printing your first forms is typically a very short time frame. So moving on to the next screen. This is just an idea of some of the pre-built forms that we have generated. So I've got a packing list, I'm showing an invoice, and I'm showing a check. And in the scenario here, when we take a look at this, most people say, well, that seems easy enough, but quite honestly, it's quite a tough venture, just because the forms that you see here are variable. When I take a look at, for example, the one form in the middle, which is acknowledgement, you have different lines that are associated with that form that can be variable throughout the form. So I could have, in some cases, I could have comments, in other cases, I don't have comments. And so how do you manage each and every single line that might print on a form and control that? Well, in some cases, we might have 40 different formats that actually get printed out. And how do you manage that or design that into InterForm? Well, if you were to do it, it's going to take you some time to review each one of those and build it out properly. So we've taken care of taking that part of it and presenting you with something that's probably 99% complete. The only thing that we really change is the logos and possibly some TNC information you might want at the bottom of the form, and you're up and running. So we have this InterForm, and when we first issued this, we had basically maybe 5 different forms, and every time we go to a customer, we end up actually adding a few more. So we have some pre-built content that is already available. So let's say that you are currently an IFM customer, and you decide to go to EFIN, or you're an AM customer and decide to go to EFIN. We've already got the AP checks for AM, so you could start using it for AM. And then when you finally do install EFIN, we've got the AP checks already available, and it's basically a smooth transition. There is no migration tool that will take whatever forms you might have installed. Let's say that currently you have ACOM or Formtastic or FormSprint as one of the products that you currently use. There is no migration tool that will automatically take you to InterForm. So having this FormPack to just say, we're going to start up with InterForm is probably a thing that you will need, because otherwise you're going to invest heavily into trying to design your own. You also have to have a developer mindset when you are building out your forms, because you have to understand file formats, you got to understand positioning, you got to understand things. So it takes a developer mindset to kind of build out the forms. So it's something that if you don't have a staff, this really makes it somewhat easier to start off with at least something and then be able to make minor changes to it. We have done an extensive amount of testing on the forms, not only internally, but also as we have installed the FormPack with various customers. If there's any issues, we take and resolve it. And ultimately, we have taken care of just about every single condition that is out there for the different variants of a form. And it also provides you with a way of that you can store the information in the IFS, so folks can go and retrieve the information. This is before you get to document management. But everything that we've set up in the background is really capable of automatically printing, emailing, archiving the forms, so that basically it's just a question of activating a workflow. But everything else, when you're all said and done, you are able to utilize the XA print overrides functions out there, and basically you utilize that to control and still manage your forms as to where you want them to print. And so we've interfaced this very well with XA. And the FormPack that we currently have can be used with the current NG and the new NG2 platforms that is coming out. So I think the value is that we can provide you a solution once it's installed that you can have forms up and running in a few weeks. And when I say a few weeks, that means that's a lot of forms. If you had MOs, POs, you just kind of want to cycle through on a timed basis so that not everything changes at once. But we can give you, if you're aggressive, all the forms can be installed and up and running in a week's time. We have done nothing to make or enhance the forms. In other words, whatever the output is that's coming out of XA, that is what we have designed into our forms. So it's still utilizing the images that that you would see representative of an acknowledgement or an MO. But then once you get into looking at it, you might say, well, I'd like the font to be larger in this area. I want this to be color coded, whatever those small adjustments might be. The forms that you get are basically the standard XA output. But when we go into a solution, the typical changes that we are asked for is to add a company logo, maybe add some static verbiage or images to a form, and email the content rather than just print it. So those capabilities are pretty close to getting you up and running and becoming a lot less dependent on the hard copy. With the XA Guides FormPack solution, we can pretty much eliminate 95% of all development that you would do just starting up and using these forms. Like I said, the 5% is going to be those minor changes that you might want to see on your forms that you've never had the capability of actually including. It is archive ready and available by default by utilizing the IFS. Within the workflow that we have built or pre-built that we install on your system, it will be looking at values within XA to try to route things via email. And all we have to do is turn that on. But just as an indicator, it can take you up to 40 hours per form if you try to do it yourself. And we know for a fact that we spent well over $200 hours, developing the base forms that we generated, and probably it's closer to 400 hours for all the forms that have now been developed. So from a standpoint of a customer, if we design a new form, all we have to do is send you the update if you're on our annual licensing fee, and you'll get forms that we're developing all the time. So the FormPack is growing as we speak. So right now, what do we have in store? I think our next layer of forms is going to be the 1099 forms. So that way, as you are processing things and have to send information out to your suppliers or folks that have been enrolled as vendors, that will have the proper 1099 forms sent to them. We're also considering some other forms, but I don't want to put down specifically what those are yet because we've got some adjustments to make. The forms that we have are good through actually 9.2.0 going through release 10. There were some changes going back to 9.1 that we have not tested, so I can't say that for sure they would work there. We are rebuilding the FormPack so it is 100% maintainable in NG2. That is something that we are currently developing. But as I mentioned, new forms that we are developing would be yours through an active ALF. And any release changes that we have to make to either the workflow or to the actual NG footprint would also be part of your ALF. So in general, the FormPack solution has, like I said, we've got quite a few forms. If we scroll through these, you can see just what the basic forms look like. This is an invoice. We've got this one here, I think might be the PO. Yep, this is the purchase order. So we got, as you can see within the body of these, the information that's in there is very different. And so you've got to, if you were looking at this, you've got to understand what those different lines represent and have to build it out. And so we've done that for you. And this is a check. And so now I'm going to turn this over to Vic. Vic is going to actually go through a demo of the actual application to show you just some of the areas of how you build out a form and how it looks to it. But it's very different from if you are an ACOM or old green screen type of developer. This is a very different look and feel of how you develop forms.
Thank you, Carlos. Hi, everybody. I'm Vic Belebchek. I'm one of the senior consultants at Guide, and among my responsibilities is helping people with the install of InterForm NG and installing templates, modifying templates. And as has already been mentioned, there are some differences with how InterForm works compared with its competitors. The main difference is that InterForm NG uses XML as input. So it does not read the standard Infor XA spool file and look to see that an address is in the upper left and the total is in the bottom right. It doesn't work that way at all. So we're going to spend a couple minutes here looking under the covers to see just how it works. So for those of you that are technically minded, this will give you a much better idea of what's really going on. The users, of course, just want the reports in whatever format they need them. And so they're never going to see or know about any of this. But once InterForm is installed, and it is a Java application, it is installed into its own subsystem called iForm NG, on the same IBMI that you have Infor XA installed. But InterForm NG, because it's a Java application, actually can be installed on other types of servers that use Java. So it's not just an IBMI application. Okay, so once it's installed into its own subsystem, it just kind of sits there and it monitors output queues looking for somebody requested a particular form to print, such as, let's say, a purchase order. So what we're looking at right here on my screen is the actual InterForm menu that is installed when the application is installed. And if we go to monitored output queues, option 1, I created one. This is on the guide server. I called it just monitor, pretty easy to remember. And so this is where it's looking at our system to see new forms. And if we take a look at it, the first thing there I can recognize from the spool file name is a purchase order. So if we take a quick look at it, hey, wait a minute, that doesn't look anything like a purchase order. And if that's what you're thinking, you're absolutely correct. It looks actually kind of like XML. So what's going on here? Well, there is a utility that we use when we install InterForm on your system. It takes the printer file of whatever reports you want to run through InterForm and creates a similarly named printer file that's in a different library higher in the library list. And that printer file, instead of creating the normal output, it creates output like this that looks like XML. And so basically, the Infor print program doesn't know the difference. It's been hijacked to create output that looks similar to XML. So this is a spool file that looks like XML. So that goes out into this output queue that's being monitored. The InterForm engine sees that spool file, and what it actually does then is it creates a true XML document from that spool file. And here's an example of one of those documents, and this is also for a purchase order. The top part of this that says job information, that is basically the spool file attributes saying who created this purchase order print job, and what's the name of the program, of course, that created it, and what's the name of the printer file, all that sort of information. And then beneath it are all the same fields that are in the original spool file, except now this is XML, with the tags being the name of the printer file field names, and the parent tags being the actual print formats that are in that particular printer file for purchase orders. So this now is what InterForm is actually going to be using to create the output when it's all said and done. And before I leave, I just wanted to go back here and mention once again that these XML definitions that we provide for you for the standard XA forms, these are actually the same record formats that Infor XA supplies to you. So in this case, we're looking at the purchase order. There are actually, let's see, 42 different formats in the standard Infor XA purchase order printer file. So rather than you having to take the time to figure out where's all the data I need, we have done that all for you. Because if you've ever had to modify a standard, one of the standard forms, you know it is not fun, it's not easy, it's not quick. So now you no longer have to do that. I mean, you still can if you choose to. InterForm could still use a modified purchase order printer file if need be, but most times there's no longer a need for that. So we supply this XML definitions that turn the output into XML that will be used by InterForm. So the next thing here that we're going to look at is a different piece of software that's supplied by InterForm. This is called the InterForm Designer. Now, this is not something that users are ever going to see. This would be installed on a PC, not on the IBM server. It is only used to make changes to templates, and the template is what formats what the end result looks like. So as you can see, we're looking at a purchase order here again. And we've made sure to design it so it looks very much like the vanilla purchase order that Infor XA and their printer file is designed to output to. So from this point on, it can be pretty easily modified. You know, for instance, if you have a different company logo, it's very easy to incorporate your own logo in its place, not difficult at all. Also, as far as things like the actual font that is being used, it uses TrueType fonts, so they scale very well. They're an industry standard. It's easy to change those. So if you don't like the one that we're currently using, you can always find something else instead. And the changes are being made on the fly right here in this view screen as we're changing the template. And the template is what is actually being shown in this left pane. And I'm actually hiding a third pane. This is the actual XML document, that a sample one that we're using. So it is on the fly, taking the template and using this particular XML document to generate what we see on this screen. So it's pretty easy to use. It's easy enough so that you know, full color is definitely available to you, both as far as if you want to fill in boxes. Also, the same thing with the fonts themselves. If you want to use color there, you certainly can do that as well. And at any time, you can look and see how would this look, how would the end result look in a PDF? And this is it right here. So it gives you an idea of the flexibility. And the template, one of the really nice things about it is it has a lot of built-in capability to condition what is being shown. I mean, it's easy enough that if you decide you don't want to see a particular field, yes, you can hide that particular field. No big deal. Boom, it's gone. But you can we also condition the display as well. We had one customer that they have different companies. So for the purchase orders, the template was actually designed to look at what is the name of the warehouse And depending upon what that warehouse name is, it would on the fly change what logo is being displayed, and also the address information here, and even could do things like change colors, so that if you had colors for particular companies on their forms, it would change that color also, all on the fly, all done in one template. So there was no need to have similar but different templates. So it made it real nice and easy to do that. We'll take another look at one other template here real quick, a custom template. This is one the company used their own custom, wanted their own custom quote form. And this is actually the form where, depending upon the company, it was looking at the company number that was in the XML document, and depending upon that, it would change the logo and the color coding scheme. And then we also added something that wasn't in the original spool file, and that was at the end of the quote, however many pages it would then automatically attach a terms and conditions page as well. So that was pretty cool feature. But we can do more than just hide information that was in the original spool file or change its location. We can also add additional information that was never on the original form without having to change the print program that created it. And how we do that is we can have the workflow, and we'll take a look at that in a minute, call SQL to bring out additional information that was not in the original form. This is one that I created for FormPack and that we supply with FormPack, but it doesn't have to be used if you don't want to. In FormPack, what I wanted to do was show that if someone prints a purchase order, that purchase order PDF would automatically be emailed back to the original user. So I created a little custom file on the IBM server that had what is the IBM user ID and what's the email address and what's the actual name of the person. And then as it is processing the purchase order that was generated by the user, it executes this little snippet right here where it actually logs into the IBM server and performs this SQL lookup saying, go find the email address for the person that generated this particular print form. And then InterForm automatically emails it back to the person. So it doesn't have to be used for emailing. It could be used to go out and grab any information that you want. For instance, if we're talking about purchase orders, maybe there's additional vendor information you want to retrieve that's not in the purchase order that's supplied by Infor. This type of utility can be used to go out and grab that information and then put it on the output. So pretty cool stuff that can be done without having to modify the original print program. So one last thing I want to show you real quick before I forget is we talked about it a little bit, and that is the workflow capability that is built into InterForm. What we're looking at now is the actual InterForm web admin that is installed and running on the IBM server. This is where we define the different types of output. For instance, we could add a new printer. It can be an IBM printer that's already attached and being used. It doesn't have to be. It could be any printer on your network. and it can, the InterForm server can talk directly to that printer, and it supports PCL is pretty much the standard anymore for laser printers, but it can also do PostScript, and it has native capability for a ZPL. So your Zebra printers, it can talk directly to your Zebra printers. InterForm is really proud of the fact that they provide that sort of real native capability. So in addition to printing, it can also archive meaning create a PDF and put that PDF somewhere on your IFS, and we can tell it exactly what that path is. It can also natively email, and here is where you would set up the email server that you want it to use when it emails the PDFs, whether it's internally or to your customers, vendors, whatever. And it also has FTP compatibility, where you define the FTP server you want to use. So if you want the PDFs, instead of just being on the IFS of your IBM server, it can also go out to a location on your network on another server, or across the internet if that's what you choose to do. So the other thing I wanted to show you real quick here before I run out of time is the workflow. So the workflow is what puts this all together. In that, once that we talked about, there's an XML document that InterForm creates. It then gets fed to this workflow engine, and the workflow engine looks for what it needs to do based on these rules. So for instance, we talked about that adding the email address lookup for the person that created it. That's being done right here, where it is actually checking to see that there is that the user hasn't been looked up yet. So then it performs the style sheet that we already looked at, that looks up and adds that email address to the XML document, and then throws it back up to the top of this workflow loop. And then, let's see, we've been talking about purchase orders. So for purchase orders, it gets down here and it says, okay, if this was the name of the printer file, AM64 MRP1, then we're going to execute this rule. And what we're going to do is actually archive the PDF into the IFS in this location right here, a folder called PO, and we're also going to email it. And we talked about the email. On the email, this just says what's the subject line for the email, and what's the name of the attachment for the actual purchase order PDF. And then we could also do additional things such as do like a carbon copy. And this right here is an additional little thing it's doing. Purchase orders, if you print 1 or 10, they all go into one spool file. Well, you don't want one giant PDF of all 10 of those purchase orders, because chances are they're for different vendors, right? So what this does, this little style sheet, it splits it apart so that regardless of how many purchase orders you're printing at one time, each individual PO will get its own PDF and could be emailed to a separate place.
Well, that concludes our webinar. I've added this last slide here. If you have questions that arise, we always welcome the opportunity to chat with you more about FormPack, address your questions, and show you how it can really amplify your XA technology investment. So you have Rick, Carlos, Randy, and Vic. You can reach out to any of them at any time, and they can continue the conversation with you. And with that, thank you again so much for joining us today.
Thanks, everybody.
Yep, thanks everyone.
Thank you all.